When corporations grow bigger than governments, wars stop being fought over land and ideology and start being fought over profit margins. Welcome to the world of Cyberpunk Red, the tabletop RPG set in the dark and chaotic future of 2045. The world didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a neon-lit, corporate-controlled dystopia. It was shaped by decades of conflict, power, struggles, and all-out war. And at the center of it all, the four corporate wars, a brutal and bloody history of megacorporations fighting for dominance, reshaping the world with each battle. Today we're diving deep into these wars because understanding them is key to knowing how the world of Cyberpunk Red came to be. So let's learn a little bit about the history that led to the chaos that players will find themselves in 2045. Let's first talk about the rise of the megacorps. So at the start of the 21st century, the world was still recovering from economic and political collapse. Governments lost legitimacy and control, leaving a power vacuum. And of course, who can step in but the megacorporations? These weren't just companies anymore, they were self-sustaining, global-spanning entities with their own armies, laws, and infrastructure. If a corporation owned oil refineries in the US, steel factories in China, and cybernetic labs in Europe, then why should they answer to a government? By the 2010s, the megacorps were beyond regulation. They controlled entire industries, manipulated politicians, and enforced their own will through private security forces. And when diplomacy and backroom deals failed, they turned to the next logical step, which of course is war. The first corporate war happened between August 2004 and February 2006. It kicked off with a hostile takeover gone wrong. Euro Business Machines, or EBM, wanted to buy out the failing Trans World Airlines, or TWA, but Orbital Air, which is a major player in the aerospace, was not having it. They backed TWA, and soon this corporate dispute turned into a full-on war. It started with cyber attacks. Zeta Tech joined Orbital Air, launching net offensives against EBM. But when hacking wasn't enough, things escalated. EBM hired terrorists. Orbital Air retaliated with piracy. The conflict got so out of hand that alliances shifted constantly, and both companies burned through millions of euro dollars just trying to outlast each other. The war climaxed with two major battles. The first was a space station hacking that got both sides a stern warning from the European Space Agency. And the second was an attack on EBM CEO Ulf Grunwalder in Bavaria, which forced EBM to surrender. The first corporate war was over, but its legacy was clear. Megacorps had just proven that military force could be a legitimate business strategy. Then we moved to the second corporate war, which happened April 2008 to August 2010. This was all about oil. So we have Petrochem and Savoil, two megacorps in the energy sector, and they were negotiating a merger. When the deal fell through, tensions rose. Then an accident at a Petrochem drilling rig caused this whole war to escalate and start. The fighting was brutal, so Savoil took the early lead, crippling Petrochem's oil facilities, but Petrochem fought back hard, launching a surprise assault that included the capture of the Spratly Islands and the assassination of Savoil's founder. This assassination, however, did not do much because Savoil was too powerful. By late 2009, they crushed Petrochem's offensive and forced them into a stalemate. The real cost of this war wasn't just corporate losses, it was environmental devastation. The South China Sea was turned into a toxic wasteland, and whole national economies collapsed. And while Savoil technically won, no one really came out of this clean. More importantly, this war showed that megacorps could openly defy national governments. They replaced leaders, ignored sanctions, and waged their war on a scale that the world hadn't seen since World War II. Then the third corporate war happened, February 2016 to November 2016. This war was different. It wasn't about land or resources, it was about information. It started when the Rothstein Fund, a banking subsidiary, exposed a scam being run by MA&F. To cover their tracks, MA&F retaliated with cyber attacks. So Rothstein fought back, hiring street net runners to dig up dirt on their enemies. What was really interesting is this war played out almost entirely in the net, so corporate networks became digital battlegrounds, and both sides launched endless waves of hacking, counter-hacking, and sabotage. But it didn't stay virtual. When hacking wasn't enough, they sent mercenaries to destroy each other's physical data centers. These attacks led to short, violent battles in low Earth orbit and on the ground, causing millions in damages and casualties. In the end, Rothstein was obliterated. MA and F handed over a few executives as scapegoats, paid some fines, and walked away. This war set a precedent. Corporate wars didn't need bullets and bombs. The battlefield of the future was data. And now we get to the big one, which was the fourth corporate war from 2021 to 2025. This was the biggest and deadliest corporate war of them all. It started when IHAG, a major corporation specializing in underwater shipping and technology, went bankrupt in 2021. Two powerful ocean-based corporations, Sino and OTEC, saw an opportunity to seize IHAG's remaining assets. At first, the war was fought behind closed doors, using stock manipulation, economic warfare, facility sabotage, and covert assassinations. But both corporations soon realized that they had reached the limits of financial and legal maneuvering. If they wanted to win, they definitely needed some firepower. That's when the real war began. OTEC hired Militech, the world's largest paramilitary security force, and Sino hired Arasaka, the infamous Japanese security and weapons megacorp. Both companies had been itching for an excuse to test their latest war-fighting technology, and the OTEC-Sino battle provided the perfect opportunity. At first, Militech and Arasaka operated in the background, supporting their clients through covert operations, but as tensions escalated, they took center stage. The war between OTEC and Sino soon became irrelevant. This was now a full-blown showdown between Militech and Arasaka. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. This is when we get to the hot part of the war, which was by mid-2021, open warfare had erupted across the world. This wasn't just corporate espionage anymore, it was full-scale combat. Cities became war zones. Nations tried to stop the chaos, but they lacked the power to control two corporate military juggernauts. The Fourth Corporate War wasn't fought like traditional wars of the past. There were no clear battlefronts, no structured campaigns. Instead, the war was defined by sudden, brutal attacks on key infrastructure, airports, spaceports, power grids, banking systems, and more. AVs and panzers provided mobile firepower. Cybernetic soldiers and power-armed troops were deployed in large numbers for the first time. And autonomous combat drones and robotic units roamed battlefields, striking targets without human oversight. The fighting reached every corner of the world, but three major battlegrounds defined it: the seas, orbit, and the net. So, talking about the sea war first, control over global shipping and supply lines was crucial. Both sides tried to cripple their opponents' access to critical resources by cutting off seaborne trade. Specially engineered bioplagues were unleashed to devastate key port cities, including Hong Kong, Shanghai, Busan, and Long Beach. The Republic of Singapore Navy successfully defended Singapore, making it one of the few major ports to remain operational. Both sides deployed autonomous naval weapons and roamed shipping lanes, sinking friendlies, neutrals, and enemies alike. The war completely shut down global trade, causing economic chaos. Hundreds of container ships were abandoned at sea, some still drifting years later in the time of the Red. Ironically, the original cause of the war, IHAG's underwater assets, was completely destroyed in the crossfire. And then we get to the orbital war. So just when it seemed like things couldn't escalate further, the war nearly extended into space. Both sides attempted to use orbital artillery, mass drivers capable of launching devastating kinetic strikes from orbit. Just as war was about to break out in low Earth orbital, or LEO, the High Riders rebelled. These space-dwelling workers, who had long been under corporate control, seized orbital launch facilities and announced their independence. With no way to reinforce their positions in space, both Militech and Arasaka lost their ability to dominate the battlefield from orbit. The High Riders had successfully cut off the war's access to the final frontier. And then we get to the net. If the Sea War wrecked the economy and the Orbital War reshaped geopolitics, then the Net War shattered the world's entire digital infrastructure. Militech feared Arasaka's Soul Killer program, which could digitize a person's mind and store it as an engram, giving them unlimited control over their enemies. To counter it, they turned to the most dangerous netrunner alive, Rash Bartmus. Bartmus wasn't just a hacker, he was a cyber terrorist, a legend, and a madman. And he had his own plans. Instead of simply attacking Arasaka, he unleashed the Data Crash, a self-replicating virus that tore through the entire net, erasing and corrupting everything it touched. AI programs went rogue, government records were erased, banking systems collapsed. The entire global economy was thrown into chaos. But Bartmus didn't stop there. He also unleashed the Rabbids, which were roving, autonomous Bartmus interface drones, an army of digital assassins designed to hunt and kill anything in cyberspace. By the time the war ended, the net was no longer safe to use. Netwatch had no choice but to shut it down completely, severing global connectivity and forcing the world into a new dark age of fragmented, localized networks. The world would never be the same again. Then we have the fall of Night City, August 20th, 2023. If the war had a final devastating exclamation point, it was the destruction of Night City. On August 20th, 2023, a nuclear bomb detonated inside the upper floors of the Arasaka Towers complex in Night City. 500,000 people died instantly. The central part of the city was reduced to rubble, and the cause of the explosion remains a mystery. Did Militech plant the bomb to finally destroy Arasaka? Did Arasaka detonate it as a last-ditch effort to deny their enemies victory? Or was it the work of an unknown third party? No one knows for sure, but the consequences were immediate. The US government nationalized Militech, placing it under military control. Arasaka was completely banished from North America, and other nations followed suit, seizing corporate assets and banning unrestricted corporate warfare. The Fourth Corporate War was over, but don't forget there was still a 3-year wrap-up as pockets of fighting are quelled by Militech and national armies. And the world it left behind was scarred, fragmented, and bleeding. It's the world of Cyberpunk Red. The damage was done, nations were shattered, the internet was dead, the balance of power had shifted. The world of Cyberpunk Red was born from the ashes of this war, and in the next video, we'll dive deep into the aftermath of the Fourth Corporate War, how it reshaped the world and set the stage for the time of the Red. Stay tuned, and remember, in the dark future, war is just business. If you enjoyed this, please consider checking out my Patreon. Your support means the world to me, and it means that I can continue to make these videos that help spread the joy of role-playing games to more people. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!